Today we're going to look at this new series that we're talking about Jonah, and I want to set up the context, but I know a lot of us, we know enough about Jonah. We just know that there was a whale, and there's a disobedient guy, and he ended up in the water, and this big whale swallowed him, and I don't know about you, but that's traumatizing in and of itself. Whenever I hear of a big fish coming after a man, I get scared. I do surf. I'm not a surfer, but I do surf. I have a shark band. Have you ever heard of one of those? My friend bought me a shark band, and you put it around your ankle, and it's supposed to send this irritating electromagnetic message to sharks to stay away, stay away, stay away, stay away. Go to the other guy, not me, stay away, stay away. That's what that thing does. I don't know, my youngest daughter, I don't want to embarrass her, but I had to get her off of Shark Week. She'd been watching Shark Week too much, and then I've been watching, and it's almost like you get drawn in because it's fascinating. Something about sharks. Back in the 70s when I was a very little boy, just the music, dun-dun, that's it, that's all, game over, game over, dun-dun. That just would strike kind of concern in you if you are of my age or above or around my age, you know what I'm talking about. A big fish goes after a man and swallows him. The Bible doesn't say it's a whale. The Bible doesn't tell us what it is. I don't know, but they say that there is a megalodon. A megalodon is a mega shark. It's big, it's huge, it's got a big mouth. There's a movie out right now called The Meg. I don't know if it swallowed him, if it was a Meg that swallowed him. I don't know if it was a humpback whale or a blue whale that swallowed him. All I know is this, I want the gummy whale. You know what I'm talking about? The one that just likes plankton. That's the one I don't want. That's the only one I want versus the one that's got a lot of rows of teeth in it and can replace it at any moment, like a staff member. Anyway, moving right along. Jonah, I'm just kidding, relax. A lot of staff in the front row over here, second row, that's why they're laughing. So let me get back to the setting of Jonah. It doesn't matter, it just said a big fish. So now when you look at Jonah was on this earth. This just broke in my hands. Jonah was on this earth on 800 BC, and during that time, the nation of Israel had already split in two. We had 10 tribes to the north, 2 tribes to the south. The 10 to the north was called Israel. They retained the name, and the 2 tribes to the south, they took the name of Judah. Very good, very good. 7 of you were listening for the past year. Israel to the north, Judah to the south. It was a civil war as a result. You had Solomon. That is when it hit its zenith. Really, it hit its zenith under David, King David. Then his son Solomon, the wisest man on earth. We went through our wisdom series with Solomon. And then he had a son named Rehoboam. And Rehoboam was filled with pride. As a result, the nation, he didn't have the capacity to lead a nation that big, that good. And so as a result of that, it split apart. And so you had 10 and 2. And so during 720 BC, the Assyrians come and they just absolutely terrorize Israel and Judah. Takes them 3 years to finally get to Israel or get to Jerusalem, but they begin to terrorize, and then they begin to deport mainly the people of Israel back to Assyria and take them, the best and the brightest. In 586 BC, now why is this all happening? Because everybody turns their back on God. Nobody's following the Lord. The Lord is sending prophet after prophet. Return, 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 return unto me. Nobody listens, nobody returns. So God says, I'm going to do this, and he actually does it, and they're all shocked. But in 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar from Babylon, we all heard about him a lot, he comes over to Judah and into Jerusalem, and he takes back with him 3 different times he comes into it, takes the best and brightest of all of Jerusalem, and he's taking Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There are other prophets who are going over at the same time, and now they're all taken out of Israel. And this is called the diaspora, the dispersing of God's people, of Hebrews, and they go all over the world. But then in 537 to 450 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's successors from Darius and Cyrus get spoken to by the power of God who speaks to them, and then they end up sending people back to Jerusalem during this period, and they go back to Jerusalem, to Israel, and inhabit Jerusalem once again. And then Ezra comes in, the prophet Ezra, and he brings all of these reforms because it got a little crazy when they all came back. And under Nehemiah's time, Prophet Nehemiah, and Ezra steps up and says, whoa, 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 and he brings in these reforms. And the reforms are so strong that they're actually xenophobic. They're actually just national-centric, and God never intended that to be like that. And so what does he do? He tells Isaiah the prophet and all of his students, the people who follow, begin to write about Jonah that happened in 800 in BC. So the book of Jonah was written in 430 BC. Are you following me? Okay, so now, that is the context of what we are looking at here at this moment. And as you open your Bibles to Jonah chapter 1, Jonah the first chapter, the Bible tells us in Jonah chapter 1 that the Lord gave this message to son Jonah of Amittai. Now I want to pause there for a moment and just say this. Jonah was a prophet. Jonah heard from God. Jonah was trained up by the Lord. Jonah was a prophet. You don't just come up and I'm a prophet. No, what's your credentials? Who did you study under? How did you learn what you learned? Are you submitted to somebody else? This is Jonah the prophet. As a matter of fact, he is in 2 Kings. You see his name. And Jonah, the son of Amittai. And it says, get up. Everybody say, get up. Get up. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh and announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are. Announce my judgment because I have seen how wicked its people are. And they were wicked, a very wicked nation. As a matter of fact, they were so wicked that the things that they began to do became some of the most detestable and most brutal practices when it came to torture that the Middle Eastern world had ever known. It was the Assyrians. The Assyrians invented things like sticking people on pikes and keeping them alive for days at a time, for stuff like just peeling off the enemy's skin and letting them stay alive for periods of time. They did detestable things, and the Lord was very displeased with them. However, he wanted to see them return, and not even return, but repent to him. Then it says, verse 2, get up and go to the great city of Nineveh, announce my judgment against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are. And then it says this, but Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. He went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving for Tarshish. He bought a ticket and went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord by sailing to Tarshish. That verse alone in verse 3 gives us so much activity of what Jonah was doing just to do what Jonah wanted to do. So much. So he got up, and after he got up, he went down. And when he went down, he went to the port. From the port, he bought a ticket. From the ticket, he waited for a ship. Found the ship, got on the ship. When he got on the ship, picked his bunk. And pretty much very, very methodical on what he was doing in order to do what Jonah wanted to do. And so when this message is about following the call of God in your life, following the call of God in your life, and number one, when you run like Jonah from your calling, number one, the further you drift, the worse it gets. The further you drift, the worse it gets. God wanted Jonah to obey him and Jonah to follow everything that God told him to do, because he was a prophet to the nation and to the nations. And here's the problem. The problem is God had always used prophets and raised up prophets to warn Israel about turning back to the Lord. God would raise up a prophet, and a prophet would speak against the nation while they were standing on Israel's soil. But God had never called a prophet to leave Israel's soil and go to another nation, go to the middle of their city and tell them that judgment is coming. God never used anybody like that. And this is the first time. And, and now we can see, it's understandable, but it's not right, why Jonah went in the absolute opposite direction. Now let me tell you, he went to Joppa. Joppa is where outside of Tel Aviv, currently in Israel. It's a beautiful city, a beautiful port. He goes down to Joppa, but from Joppa he goes down to Tarshish. You know where Tarshish is? Can I get the map? Tarshish is in Spain, everybody. He is all the way in Joppa. He's supposed to go right, but he goes left. He got as far away as possible as he could get. And the Bible tells us not only did he just go away, he wanted to flee the presence of the Lord. The psalmist tells us in Psalm 139 verse 7, he says, I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go up to heaven, you are there. If I go down to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, If I dwell in the farthest oceans, even where your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in darkness, I cannot hide from you. To you, the night shines as bright as the day. Darkness and light are the same to you. In other words, wherever I go, you're always with me. Can I tell you, you can't shake the Lord? If you're already saved and the Holy Spirit's inside of you, you can't undo that. You can't like get him out. Get God out. I can't get God out. Because he'll never leave you and he'll never forsake you. And no matter where you go, he's coming with you. Why? Because he loves you and he made you a promise. Because there's going to be times in our life that we might get a little bit of brain damage. You know what I'm talking about? Hopefully we're beyond that. Hopefully we've outgrown that, but we might get a little bit of brain damage where we're like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? What are you doing? And there are going to be times that you're going to go in the opposite direction that God called you, and God knows that we like to be, that we can sometimes become the prodigal. God knows that sometimes that we have the tendency to be like Jonah, that God called you, but we try to separate the calling from following the call, by following God. You can't separate both. You can't separate both. See, you can fall away and walk away from your call, but walking away from your call is like walking away from the one that called you. You can walk away or turn your back on the assignment. It's like turning your back on not just the assignment, but on the teacher that gave you the assignment. And what God wants us to understand is that it's not like, see, he went as far as he could away from God. You know why? Because they believed that the God was the God of the firmament. That God had a territory. That, remember, like the Old Testament said, oh, their God is the God of the hills, not the God of the valleys, and that's why they fight so well. It says, well, the God of the valleys and God of the hills. That's why they fight so good in the valleys. But God is the God of the valley and the hills, and it doesn't matter what land it is, God is the God of everything. And in those days, they actually believed that gods were territorial. Small g gods was territorial, but we all know that the big God, Yahweh, he is everywhere, every place, all the time. He is omnipotent, he is omniscient, he is omnipresent, he is everywhere, you can't leave him, you can't forsake him, even though you try. And so it's like Jonah is going, I'm going to go, get the map back up, I'm going to go as far as I can go to the edge of the world. Because pretty much after that, we all know that the world is flat, right? We've been told that just recently. It's no longer round. It's no longer a sphere, but it is flat. And so he's going to push the envelope all the way to as far as he can go. Because he thinks that if he can get away from God, he needs to leave the territory. And that's why in 2 Kings, when I preached on this on Naaman or Naaman, depending where you come from, Naaman, he was the general that was up north in Syria, and he had leprosy, and this little girl goes, oh, I wish my master could get healed. If you only saw the prophet, the man of God in Israel. And then he ends up going, and he's coming down, and his name is Naaman, and then he wants to see Elisha. Elisha won't see him, so he goes, go dunk yourself 7 times in the river. Okay, like take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. Dunk yourself. And he goes, oh, he doesn't even come to see me. I'm so upset. He had an anger problem, but he calmed down finally, and he goes down into the river 7 times, dunk, 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 dunk. Oh, come, man. The leprosy's gone. His arms and his face and his body looks like a little baby's waikele. You know what I'm talking about? A baby's bottom. And he goes back and he goes, oh, I want to give you all this clothes, all this silver. Thank you so much. He goes, I'm not going to take none of that. We don't need none of that. Thank you so much. Then he goes, well, if there's anything that I can take, can I take earth with me? Can I take 2 carts of dirt with me? Because what I want to do is I want to spread it in my yard. I want to kneel it and I want to worship your God. Because why? Because they thought that gods were territorial. They came, not just territorial, when we think territorial, we think like a pit bull, don't come in my territory. It wasn't like that. It was, God was in the land. So Jonah's thinking that God will go, oh, he's at the ship. I can't go. Jonah. And some of us, not us, some of you, you go into the club that you shouldn't go to, and you think God's like, oh, can't. No, he's with you. He's with you. No matter where you go, he went. You saw the sticker Eddie would go, God always went. Because why? Because he loves you. He loves you, and he won't let you go. The further you drift, the worse that it gets. Then it says that he bought a ticket to Joppa. Can I tell you, when he bought a ticket to Joppa, he probably spent his life's earnings. Number two, when you fall away from the call of God, not only do you drift further and further away, but number two, the fare you pay is more than you needed. Wow. You end up paying more than you should have paid. There's a higher price, costs more, collateral damage. You'll pay in other ways, not just financially, because it costs more to run than it is to obey. Running from God is going to cost you something. Jonah has to pay to go to Joppa. Running from God will exact a price from you. And instead of seeing God as your helper, you see God as your problem. God is like, God, you're messing up my plans. God, what are you doing, what you're doing? That's only when you're running. If you're not running, you're fine. But sometimes we don't need to run. We just stay in a little holding pattern. And so what begins to happen is like, oh, I'm not running. I'm just not doing anything. I'm not thinking about anybody. Just don't worry, it's not you. It's your neighbor. I'm not thinking about anybody. Because, I was here. I was here in this place at one time that I wanted to do what Mike wanted to do. It was called Mike's will for his life. And I was saved, sanctified, set apart, going to church every Sunday, tithing, offerings, everything. But I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And for an entire year, I wanted Mike's will for my life rather than God's will for my life. And so when Lisa and I had first got married, and we were married, and I was going in that direction, she's like, I don't know why he keeps doing that. It's not his call, but I'm supporting him because I love him and because he's just going to have to find out. And thank you for letting me find out. And I found out. But can I tell you, for that whole year that I found out, I wrestled. I wrestled. I had a lot of angst. And some of you are going through that right now. Some of you are struggling. So why is it not happening like it should be happening? How come it's not flowing like I know it should be flowing? How come I'm better than them and it's not happening and I know I'm better than them? Yeah, you might be better, but sometimes God sends a little bit of a storm to not allow you to do what you wanted to do. Because why? Because he loves you too much and he knows the assignment that he has on your life. Because the Bible tells us right here that in Jonah chapter 1, verse 4-6, that the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea. This was not a demonic-induced storm. We already know about those. Jesus will get up and go, peace be still, silence, and all of a sudden everything's done. Jesus is going to the other side of the lake where there was a man who was possessed by demons. And he needed to get there, right? And when he was going to get there, he was going to set this man free. But the devil didn't want him to do it. Demons were rising up inside of this ocean, and all of a sudden, big storm, and now preventing him from even going over there. That's a demonic-induced storm. Sometimes there's just storms that happen because it's called the atmosphere. And then there are times that God will send a storm. And this one, God is sending a storm. Because why? Because he knows that this young man is paying too much that he's going to pay. He knows that the further he drifts, the worse it's going to get. So what is he trying to do? Send a storm to get his attention. And I think he's got his attention. See, number 3, the scenery may change, but not your assignment. You could move from the east side to the west side or from the west side to the east side. And if you're still the same person, things will eventually catch up and be the same there. Unless you change, because you know why? Because you're going, and you go where you go. You can move from here to the mainland and do whatever you have to do and go because you're called or because you're sent or because you're assigned, and you go. And if you don't change, you're still going with you. It's just a different place. Same thing with your call. You may have a scenery change, but not your assignment change. And when you change your mind and you follow and you turn back from going to a place called Tarshish and saying, I'm going back to Joppa, I'm going back to Joppa, I don't think so. You know what I'm talking about? That is way above a lot of y'all's heads, and you gotta be like 80s, like hip, cool. I just dropped a little bit of what is his name? LL Cool J. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Oh, you! What? Going back to Cali. Going back to Joppa. I don't think so. All right, moving right along. But when you go in your own direction and you live in the life that you want to live, it's kind of like you're like this. Oh, man. It's like, oh, man, I'm on a cruise ship. I'm going where I want to go. # living my best life. And it's like, yeah, I'm on a ship. paid all this money. I'm going to Tarshish, and it's going to be amazing. And then all of a sudden, you're thinking, yeah, I'm living my best life now. Instagramming, hashtag best life. You're doing all of that. You're like selfieing your Instagram, making sure that you get yourself real good on that cruise ship, and then with your tropical drink in your hand. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, all of a sudden the storm comes, and then you singing the theme song to Titanic. And because why? Because hashtag your best life now ain't your best life right now. Because why? Because God ain't in the middle of your best life. If God is in the middle of your life, it's your best life now. It may be a rowboat. It may be a sailboat. It might be a lifeboat. But if God is in the middle, it's your best life now. Ooh, that's just... oh, man. Anyway, so I missed you guys. So anyway, think about this. Jonah, but the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea and causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Fearing for their lives, the desperate sailors shouted to their gods for help and threw the cargo overboard to lighten the ship. And so the captain went down after him and says, "How can you sleep at a time like this?" He shouted, "Get up and pray to your God. Maybe he will pay attention to us and spare our lives." Here's a story of a man that is called and is going in the opposite direction. Well, there's a story that impacts us today in Hawaii, and 200 years ago, this is the 200-year anniversary of this young man doing something bolder and going in a direction that he never expected things would happen the way that they did. So one is willing to go against God, and one is no guarantees and is following God. And in 1808, a young boy named Opukahaya, who grew up on the Big Island, whose mom and dad were killed before his very own eyes, whose little brother was on his back while he was running away from the warriors that were trying to catch him in Ka'u. They threw a spear, hit his little brother in the back, and his little brother died. And now he's trying to run away. The warrior catches him. Now he is owned by the warrior, taken to the Kohala district where he lives with the warrior and his wife. They were kind to him, according to Henry's or Opukahaya's memoirs. But they were kind to him, but still he was heartbroken and could not forgive the man that had killed his parents and his entire family. A year goes by, and his uncle, his mother's brother, his uncle is a kahuna, and they see each other. They had not seen each other in some time on the way to Kona for a festival, for makahiki. When he gets there, his uncle takes him back from the warrior, says, "I am going to raise this young boy." He was a kahuna. You know what I'm talking about? He had status in the ways of Lono, the god of land and of the harvest. And he could trump any warrior because of his status. And so the uncle took him. And then he raised Opukahaya in Kealakekua Bay in that area to become a kahuna. Kahu means shepherd, to be a kahuna. And he began to raise up Opukahaya. But Opukahaya had an idea that one day maybe all these whaling ships and the seal ships would come to Kona. They would re-outfit their ships. They would take timber with them. They would get fresh water. Amazing. And then they would go to Honolulu Harbor, Honolulu called Ko'u. It was a safe harbor before they, of course, dredged it. And this is in Waikiki, where King Kamehameha, during his later years, had his camp. This is where he stayed, right outside of Waikiki. And this is where they would outfit themselves. And then the captain of the ship welcomed him on board and said, "Do you want to go with me?" And he wanted to go. He had his sights set on just leaving Hawaii. His name, Opukahaya, means opu, stomach. And it's either translated the cutting of the stomach or the severing of the umbilical cord. That's his name. Well, Hawaiian names, there's 7 different meanings. So now he goes. Him and a young boy named Thomas Hopu are on this ship together. These 2 Hawaiian boys. They end up going off the coast of Chile because they're taking all the provisions to the people, and they seal furs. And they take the seal furs and they go all the way back to Kona, re-outfit the ship, and then they head over to China. And they in China they trade, and then they take all the silks that they get from China and the China plates, and they take those and they go back, and the shipper makes millions of dollars to us. Back then, but Opukahaya on the way over learns English. He learns about Jesus, gives his life to Jesus on the boat. He ends up in Connecticut, and where he's in Connecticut, 2 Hawaiian boys in Connecticut in 1808. And now while they're in Connecticut, They start learning, start teaching these. In 8 years, he learns Hebrew, he learns Greek, he learns Latin, he learns English. He gets a degree at Yale University because it used to be a seminary. That's how it started out. Yale and Harvard, Princeton all started off as seminaries. He's at Yale, and he's got a seminary degree. But before they give him a degree, the Bible tells us, or not the Bible didn't tell us, the historical accounts tell us that Opukahaya was on the steps of Yale University crying. Says, because nobody learned me. Nobody learned me. And so the president of Yale University took him under his wing. Another family adopted him, pastors and reverends. And this is during the beginning of the Second Great Awakening. The First Great Awakening was with Jonathan Edwards. The Second Great Awakening was about to hit. And so this young boy learned everything that he needed to learn. He was handsome. He was charismatic. He was the poster boy for missions. And they wrote a book on him. And that book they sold. And it became the #1 bestseller in all of New York during that time. And Opukahaya had a dream to come back with the first missionary vessel to come to Oahu, to come to the Big Island, to come to Hawaii. And in his own native language, in his own Olelo, begin to teach and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ that was prophesied, I hope I got this right, that to Heva, the final kahuna of King Kamehameha, that he prophesied that a white man would bring a box, and in the box was life, a black box. You know what that was? That was the Bible.
So good, yeah.
So Opukahaya is learning how to translate the book of Genesis into Hawaiian, because the Hawaiian language was it was just oral. They had petroglyphs, and they never had a written language. And so now he's translating this, and then in 1817, he gets typhoid fever and he dies. In 1818. And in 1819, though, because of his wish, and because of what God was doing during the Second Great Awakening, they sent a ship with 6 families to come to Hawaii for the first time with the gospel. It was Asa Thurston. He was the co-leader, along with Hiram Bingham. He was the other co-leader. I don't know, remember the name of the other 4 families. And then they got here. And in 15 to 20 years, they preached the gospel. They had a printing press. They built Kawaihaʻo Church. They had the home there. There's the original printing press. The building on the outside where they took the Hawaiian's language and said, let me give you a language. Let me give you the words to it. Let me give you the consonant. Let me give you the vowels. Let me give you your language. Let me help set you free, because you're going to read this Bible. It's going to change your life. And the Hawaiians became the most literate people on the face of the planet during that time. And then it ushered in a revival. Not even a revival, an awakening. An awakening is different from a revival. Revival is somebody's dead. You got to raise them back to life. They weren't dead. They just didn't know. And the awakening happened. And let me tell you, Elmer Towns, the Bible historian, says that it was ranked one of the top 10 revivals in the history of the world. Equivalent to Nineveh. Equivalent to Nineveh. Turning to God. And then the gospel's still going. People are still getting saved. Circuit riders, preachers on horseback, going all over every island. And then all of a sudden, in 1835 and 1840-ish, I got my dates we'll see what happens. And then all of a sudden, this pastor on a small church in Hilo in 1835, after already 15 years of the gospel being here, retires. They replace him with a man named Titus Cohen. Titus Cohen comes down here. His brother-in-law is Jonathan Edwards. And then he and his wife take over the highly congregational church in Sleepy Hilo. And then boom, the presence of God hits Hilo, the whole Big Island. Hawaiians, everybody is coming to Jesus. They're camping in Hilo town. They don't leave for 2 years. And the church explodes. It went from 200 people to 10,000 people with an average weekend attendance of 7,000 people. The biggest church on the planet was in Hilo in 1845. And so now we are going to celebrate the 200-year anniversary. And you know what? I'm thankful that God sent missionaries here. I'm glad that he sent them. Yeah, the second and third, I'm going to leave my comments about that, the second and third generation. Not necessary. But I thank God for the first generation. But I thank God for Opukahaya. That when Jonah says, Opukahaya goes, When Jonah says, I want to do what I want to do. I want to go where I want to go. Opukahaya says, I don't know where you're leading me, but I'll go wherever you want me to go, say whatever you want me to say, be whatever you want me to be, do whatever you want me to do. I will go. Here I am, Lord, send me. And that's what he did. And as a result, here we are today. Here we are today. God can turn things around if you turn yourself around. God can reach people. God can reach millions if you say yes. God can do everything. See, there's a universal call of God. That means everybody's got this call, right? Preach the gospel, right? What else? Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Everybody, that's a universal call of God. But you know, each and every one of us has a personal call from God. Discovering it is half the battle. Living it out is the rest. And when you discover it, and like Rick Warren said, the greatest day of your life is number one, when you realize that the day that you were born. That's the greatest day of your life, the day that you were born. Mine, the greatest day of my life is December 8, 19, never mind. You know what I'm talking about? Greatest day of my mom's life, greatest day is my life. Greatest day of Lisa's life is when, anyway, greatest day of my life is like I came into this world. Second greatest day is when I realized this is why I'm on earth. Same thing for all of us. The greatest day is the day that you were born. The next thing, the greatest day is the day that you realize why you were born. Why you're here on this earth. The personal call of God in your life. And when you turn around and you say, God, I will do whatever you want me to do. I'll do it. Not my will, but your will be done. Everyone around you, number 4, feels the effects. Everyone around you feels the effects. But when you're not following God, everyone around you feels the effects. Jonah is confronted in Jonah chapter 1. It says, who are you? What is your line of work? What country are you from? What is your nationality? As a matter of fact, it's kind of like this. He goes, the captain of the ship captain comes, hey, how can you, wake up. How can you sleep at a time like, how can you sleep? How can you sleep? And some of us, or somebody you love, how can you sleep? How can you sleep? How can you sleep? Sometimes we think, well, I can sleep, so I think I'm okay. It's not bothering my conscience. I can sleep. Don't confuse that, the peace of Jesus, with the peace of Jonah. Peace of Jonah means I can go, I'm fine. Don't judge me. I won't judge you. It's all good. And then somebody brings it up, and now you feel, well, you just brought it up. Now I feel really bad, but I'm going to sleep anyway. And then when we go to sleep, and we got the peace of Jonah, because I can sleep through anything. I can sleep through any storm. Storms going all around me. People are like panicking up on the deck, but I can sleep through it. Different from Jesus being in your boat, storms going around you, you freaking out, but Jesus is in the back sleeping. Why? Because he can command the storm to be quiet. He can still it. 2 different pieces. You want the peace of Jesus and not the peace of Jonah, because everyone around you feels the effects. Verse 10. And it said, now, well, let's go to verse 10. And the sailors were terrified. And when they heard this, right, and they already told them that he was running away from the Lord, oh, why did you do it? How's this? Non-Hebrews are saying to a Hebrew following God, why did you fall away from God? Why did you do it? We're all getting affected. Then it says this. He says, oh, Lord, why did you do it? They groaned, and since the storm was getting worse all the time, they got worse and worse and worse. They asked him, what should we do to you to stop this storm? What should we do to you to stop this storm? Tell us, what is the solution? What is the solution? He says this, throw me into the sea. Jonah said, and it will become calm again. I know this terrible storm is all my fault. Instead, the sailors rowed even harder to get to the ship to the land. They rowed even harder, but the stormy sea was too violent for them, and they couldn't even make it. And then they cried out to the Lord, and to Jonah's God said, oh, Lord. They're not even believing this God. Oh, Lord, they pleaded. Don't make us die for this man's sin, and don't hold us responsible for his death. Oh Lord, you have set this storm upon him for your own good reasons. In other words, God, this is between you and him. Just when I'm out, they pull me back in. I want nothing to do with this. I'm just leading the ship. And you brought, this guy comes on here. You throw a storm. Don't hold us responsible for what we're about to do to him. So Jonah goes, right, Jonah said, they say, Jonah, what should we do? What should we do? What do we need to do? Throw me into the sea. We're like, throw yourself into the sea. I'm not throwing you into the sea. I don't want that on my conscience. Come on, grab his pants. Right, here we go. Heave. Oh, this is where the first flossing started happening, like that. Boom. Boom. It's like, let's toss this guy. I love the 8:45. Become my favorite. 10:45. I don't know what's happening. Losing their edge. Throw this thing. Go, powder. Powder. Sorry about the spit. Powder. We see you do cherry bomb. We see you dive. Do the watermelon. Do the watermelon. Let me cover your powder. So yeah, what is he talking about? It's different kinds of dives off of diving boards and cliffs and stuff like that. And you just, somebody bombs and you come over, cover. Throw yourself into the sea. Throw yourself into the sea. Why? Because when you don't follow God and his call, it turns your responsibilities into someone else's burden. I'm almost finished. Hang in there. Okay, there's no sporting events today. There's nothing good on TV. It's baseball season. It's boring right now, everybody. There's no basketball. Football could take a couple months. Hang with me for a little while. So, they lighten the load of the ship. They're grabbing luggage and they're throwing it overboard. They're taking valuables. They got to lighten the ship, right? Read that? For employees, employers, business owners, sometimes you're trying to save one person, but the whole ship is going down because of one person. And you work extra hard, you work harder just to save that one person when your whole ship is going down. Sometimes you start chucking your values, things that you hold dear, things that you are about, things that you stand for, to keep somebody on the ship. I'm just going a little bit leadership right now. And sometimes the best thing that you could do is let them go in the water. God sends a big fish. Best thing that happened to Jonah was the captain finally saying, you got to go. We tried everything. You got to go. Best thing that happened to the ship, the best thing that happened to Jonah. The child that needs rehab, step out of the way, best thing that could happen to him. Son and daughter might be wreaking havoc right now in your own house, and the little ones are watching. You're going to have problems with them later on. You work hard, but at some point, that's on you. That's with you. You got to think about that. What is it that you are allowing and accommodating? Person, a noun, person or thing. What are you accommodating on your boat is going to eventually take down your ship until you just start going. They're making a U-turn and going in the right direction. Let me give you 3 simple things. I can give it to you real quick. Put them all up at the same time on the board. And here it is. Now, when you start following God's plan for your life, when you run to your mission, it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice. Oh, I sacrificed so much to follow Jesus. I know. I felt like I've sacrificed so much when I gave up my jobs. It doesn't feel like a sacrifice. You count it a privilege to be called. God, it's such a privilege that you called me. God, it's such a privilege. I get to do what I get to do. I get to serve in the military and represent you, and I'm in Hawaii. It is a privilege. It's not a sacrifice. I'm called. I get to be at this school. I get to be at this church. I get to do what you called me to do. I get to work where I work and be your representative. Thank you, God. Thank you. I count it a privilege to be called. Number 3, your cooperation brings lasting fruit. Jonah cooperated, and he goes in the other direction. Pukahiah goes in that direction to the death. Your cooperation brings lasting fruit.